The sun had barely risen over the small town when a quiet woman unlocked the doors of the local music school. She carried a faded bag over her shoulder and wore the same calm expression she did every morning. The hallways were still dark, the smell of polished wood and old sheet music hanging in the air. Her footsteps echoed softly as she moved from room to room, opening windows to let the morning light in. Every day, she arrived before anyone else. She swept the floors, dusted the piano lids, and arranged the benches neatly. Most people barely noticed her, but she didn't seem to mind. She worked quietly, humming to herself as she cleaned. Sometimes she would pause by one of the grand pianos, running her fingers lightly across the keys, never pressing down, as if afraid the sound would break the piece. When students and teachers started to arrive, she always stepped aside, giving them space. She greeted them politely, though many of them only nodded in return. To them, she was just part of the background, the woman who kept everything clean and tidy. But inside her heart, there was a story no one knew. Long ago, before life became so ordinary, she had loved music more than anything in the world. As a young girl, she would sit for hours at her old upright piano, playing every song she could find. Her parents couldn't afford lessons, but she learned by listening, by feeling, by watching others. When she grew older, she saved every coin she could to take a few lessons at a nearby school. Her teachers were amazed by her natural talent. They said she played as if the piano was part of her soul. But life doesn't always let people follow their dreams. There were bills to pay, family to care for, and one by one her hopes of performing faded. She stopped playing in public, then stopped playing altogether. The piano she once loved so deeply gathered dust in a corner until it was sold one day to help her survive. Years passed, and music became something she only heard from a distance, through open windows, from passing cars, or in this very school where she worked now. Sometimes, when the halls were empty, she would stand by one of the pianos and close her eyes, remembering the feeling of her fingers dancing across the keys. But she never allowed herself to play again. One morning, as she wiped down the piano in the main hall, a group of young students rushed in, laughing and talking. Their teacher followed behind, carrying a thick folder of sheet music. The woman stepped aside, letting them begin their lesson. She quietly worked in the corner, listening to the sound of notes filling the air. The teacher was strict but kind. He had been preparing his class for an upcoming recital, and everyone was nervous. The piece they were practicing was a difficult one, fast, emotional, full of complicated finger movements. The students struggled to keep up, often missing notes or losing rhythm. After the fifth attempt, the teacher sighed loudly and rubbed his forehead. "Again," he said. "You must feel the music, not just play it." The students tried again, but the piece fell apart midway. A few of them giggled, embarrassed. One student, frustrated, said, "It's impossible. No one can play this perfectly." The teacher chuckled, trying to lighten the mood. "Oh, come now. It's not impossible. Maybe even our cleaner here could do it better," he said jokingly, glancing at the woman in the corner. Everyone laughed. The woman smiled faintly, unsure how to respond. She kept wiping the piano bench, pretending not to mind. But the teacher, wanting to make the students relax, added, "Why don't we see? Would you like to give it a try?" The students laughed again, thinking it was a funny idea. "Yes, let her try," one of them said, grinning. The woman froze, her hand still holding the cloth. She turned slowly toward them, her eyes filled with quiet surprise. "Oh no," she said softly. "I haven't played in many years." But the teacher, still in a playful mood, waved his hand. "Just a few notes. Come on, don't be shy. We all need a good laugh." Something about his words made her feel small again, like she was invisible even when everyone was looking. For a moment she wanted to refuse and walk away, but something inside her, something that had been asleep for too long, stirred. She looked at the piano, at its shining black surface, the familiar white keys, and the faint scratches from years of use. Her heart started to beat faster. She hadn't touched one in so long, yet it felt like the instrument was calling to her. Slowly, she set her cleaning cloth aside. The room grew quiet as she stepped forward. The students exchanged amused glances, whispering to each other. The teacher smiled politely, folding his arms, expecting nothing more than a clumsy attempt. She hesitated before sitting down. Her fingers hovered above the keys, trembling slightly. The smell of wood polish mixed with the faint scent of dust brought back memories she thought she had forgotten. Long nights of practice, The thrill of applause, the warmth of music that once filled her world. She took a slow breath. Her fingers rested gently on the keyboard, and for a moment the room seemed to hold its breath too. Then she pressed the first key. It was just one note, soft and clear, then another, and another. The sound echoed through the hall, and the laughter that had filled the room moments ago vanished into silence. Her hands began to move, first hesitantly, then with growing confidence. The music poured out of her like water from a long-sealed spring. The teacher's smile faded. The students stared, their mouths slightly open. The woman's hands danced across the keys with perfect rhythm and emotion. The difficult piece that had frustrated the class sounded effortless in her touch. Each note carried something deep, a story of love, loss, and quiet strength. It wasn't just technique. It was heart. She played as if the piano had been waiting for her all this time. By the time she reached the final note, the room was utterly still. The sound lingered for a few seconds before fading away completely. No one moved. No one spoke. Her hands remained on the keyboard, trembling softly. She didn't look up. She simply whispered, "I'm sorry. I didn't mean to interrupt your class," and started to stand. The teacher quickly stepped forward, his face pale with astonishment. "Wait," he said quietly. "Where did you learn to play like that?" The woman smiled faintly, her eyes glistening with emotion. "A long time ago," she said. Before I stopped, he didn't know what to say. Neither did the students. They just stood there realizing that the woman they had ignored every day, the one who mopped their floors and emptied their trash, had just played one of the hardest piano pieces with the grace of a true artist. The woman picked up her cloth again, quietly returning to her work. She didn't ask for praise or attention. For her, that brief moment at the piano was enough. It reminded her that her gift had never truly left. It had only been waiting for her to believe in it again. As she wiped the piano lid gently, she caught her reflection on its surface. For the first time in years, she saw not just a cleaner or a forgotten dreamer. She saw the person she used to be, the one who loved music deeply, who once believed in the beauty of sound and the strength of her own hands. The students still stood there, whispering softly to each other. Their teacher finally said, almost to himself, "We had no idea." The woman just smiled and said kindly, "That's all right. Sometimes people only see what they expect to see." When the class ended, she finished cleaning the rest of the room, humming a gentle melody under her breath. Her steps felt lighter than before. She didn't know what the teachers or students would think of her now, and she didn't really care. For the first time in many years, she felt alive again. That evening, when the school was empty and the last light of sunset streamed through the windows, she sat once more at the piano. This time there was no audience, no laughter, no eyes watching. She played quietly for herself. The notes filled the empty hall, echoing softly against the walls, wrapping her in warmth and peace, and as she played, she realized something. It didn't matter how much time had passed or how much life had changed. Her connection to music had never truly disappeared. It had simply been waiting patiently for her to return. The next morning, the music school felt a little different. The same sunlight streamed through the tall windows. The same sound of footsteps echoed down the hallway, but there was a quiet buzz in the air, whispers that followed the woman everywhere she went. Students who had barely looked at her before now glanced up as she passed, some pretending to be busy, others just watching in silence. The teachers spoke to each other in low voices, casting curious looks her way. She noticed, of course, but she didn't say anything. She went about her work as usual, wiping the piano keys, sweeping the corridors, and setting out fresh water for the flowers near the entrance. Her life had never been about attention or praise. She was content with small things, a peaceful morning, a kind smile, a quiet song in her heart. But deep inside, something had changed. The night before, she had played the piano for the first time in many years, and even now her fingers still tingled with the memory of those notes. The sound had stayed with her, echoing softly in her mind. For the first time in so long, she had felt alive again, truly alive. It frightened her a little, how easily those old feelings came back. But it also filled her with warmth. That afternoon, while cleaning the main hall, she noticed the same teacher who had asked her to play the day before standing near the door. He seemed hesitant, almost nervous, When she looked up, he smiled politely and said, "Good afternoon." She nodded, a little unsure. He stepped closer and said quietly, "About yesterday, I wanted to thank you." She stopped wiping the piano and looked at him confused. "Thank me?" He nodded again. "For playing. I didn't mean to embarrass you. I didn't expect what I heard. None of us did." The woman smiled gently. "It's all right," she said softly. "You didn't know." The teacher sighed, running a hand through his hair. "No, we didn't. But after you left, I couldn't stop thinking about it. The way you played, and it wasn't just skill. It was something else. It was real." She said nothing, only lowered her eyes, feeling her cheeks warm. He continued, "If you don't mind me asking, where did you learn to play like that?" For a moment, she didn't know what to say. The memories came back in flashes. Her small childhood home, her mother's smile, the sound of rain on the roof while she practiced for hours. "I learned a long time ago," she finally said. "I used to study at a small music school far from here. I loved it more than anything. But life changed." The teacher nodded slowly, understanding that there was pain in her words. "You stopped playing?" She nodded. "Yes, I had to. Sometimes dreams have to wait." He didn't press her further. There was something in her voice that told him not to ask more. Instead, he said kindly, "Well, if you ever wish to play again, the piano here is always open to you. You don't have to ask." She looked at him surprised. "Thank you," she whispered. He smiled, then left quietly, leaving her alone with her thoughts. That evening, after everyone had gone home, she stood in the empty hall once more. The piano gleamed under the soft yellow light. For a long time, she just stood there staring at it. Then slowly, as if her body moved before her mind could decide, she sat down. Her fingers hovered over the keys and she began to play. The notes were soft at first, hesitant, then stronger, fuller, flowing like a river. She played not for anyone else, but for herself, for the little girl who once believed she could fill the world with music. She didn't notice that the door to the hallway had been left slightly open. A few students walking past stopped when they heard the melody drifting out. They peered through the crack in the door, their eyes wide in amazement. One of them whispered, "That's her, the cleaning lady." They stood there listening, not daring to interrupt. Her playing carried emotion they couldn't describe. Sadness, hope, and beauty all at once. When she finally stopped, the last note hung in the air like a sigh. The students quietly slipped away, but word spread again, this time faster than before. By the next day, nearly everyone in the school knew about her hidden talent. Some teachers whispered about it during lunch. Others mentioned it to their students. A few even felt embarrassed, realizing how they had treated her before. But for her, nothing really changed. She still showed up early, still cleaned the floors, still smiled politely at everyone. The only difference was the small spark in her eyes, a quiet light that hadn't been there before. One morning, as she finished polishing the piano in the practice room, the head of the school approached her. He was an older man, kind but strict, with a deep respect for music. He had heard the rumors and wanted to see for himself. "Good morning," he said warmly. "May I have a word with you?" She nodded, a little nervous. He looked at her kindly. "I heard something quite remarkable about you. They say you can play the piano beautifully. Is it true?" She blushed slightly and shook her head. "I only played a little. I don't really perform anymore," he smiled. "Well, the recital is coming up next week. We usually invite our teachers to play a short piece before the students perform. Would you consider playing for us?" Her heart almost stopped. "Oh no, I couldn't," she said quickly. "I'm not a performer anymore. It's been too long." The man's smile didn't fade. Sometimes talent never truly fades. It only waits. "Think about it, all right? No pressure." He left her standing there, her heart pounding. All day she thought about it. The idea of performing again terrified her. She hadn't stood before an audience in years. What if she made a mistake? What if they laughed? She didn't want attention. She had learned to live quietly, unseen. Yet deep down, something inside her whispered that maybe this was her chance to reconnect with the part of herself she had lost. That evening, she sat on her small bed, staring at her worn hands. They were rough from years of cleaning and hard work, but they were still the same hands that once played with passion and grace. She thought of her younger self, full of dreams, full of music, and felt a wave of sadness and pride wash over her. Maybe it's time, she whispered to herself. The next day, she found the head of the school and quietly said, "I'll play." He smiled warmly. "I'm glad to hear that. We'll make sure you have some time to practice." Over the next few days, whenever her cleaning work was done, she would stay late to practice. The sound of her music filled the empty hallways each night. The janitor from the other wing would sometimes stop to listen. A few students would linger outside, pretending to wait for something but really just wanting to hear her play. With each day, her confidence grew. Her fingers moved more freely, her touch became lighter, and her heart began to open again. The music that had once been buried deep inside her was returning, stronger and purer than ever. One evening, after finishing a piece, she looked up and saw the teacher from before standing quietly near the doorway. He had been listening without saying a word. When she noticed him, she smiled shyly. "I didn't hear you come in." He stepped closer, smiling. "I didn't want to interrupt. You play with so much feeling. The students could learn more from you than from any of us." She laughed softly, shaking her head. "I don't know about that. I just play what I feel. That's exactly what makes it beautiful," he said. As he left, she sat at the piano again, resting her hands gently on the keys. For the first time in years, she felt peace, a calm that came not from silence but from sound. In the days leading up to the recital, the excitement in the school grew. Posters went up, students practiced endlessly, and whispers about the mystery pianist spread quietly among them. Some didn't believe it, others couldn't wait to see it for themselves. The woman stayed quiet, never boasting, never showing off. She just practiced one note at a time, letting her music speak for her. The night before the recital, she sat alone in the main hall. The chairs were set up, the stage decorated with flowers. She walked up to the piano and ran her fingers across the keys. The hall was empty and still, but she imagined the faces that would soon fill it. Teachers, students, strangers, all waiting to hear her play. For a moment, fear filled her chest. But then she remembered the feeling from that first day, when she had played without thinking, when her heart had taken over completely. She smiled softly to herself. "It's just music," she whispered, "and music has always been my home." She took a deep breath, closed the piano lid, and quietly walked out of the hall, the sound of her footsteps echoing gently behind her. The morning of the recital arrived with a calm sky and cool air drifting through the town. The music school was busier than ever. Students rushed through the corridors with their instruments, carrying sheet music and nerves in equal measure. Teachers walked quickly from one room to another, checking final preparations, making sure everything was perfect for the evening. In the middle of all that noise, the quiet woman went about her work as usual. She arranged the chairs in the hall, dusted the piano one last time, and made sure every corner was spotless. Her hands trembled slightly, though she tried to hide it. She had promised to play tonight, and the thought of facing a room full of people made her heart race. She wasn't used to being seen. For years she had moved through life like a soft shadow, unnoticed, unbothered, and at peace with her quiet world. But now there would be eyes watching her, expecting something she wasn't sure she could still give. After finishing her work, she sat in the back of the hall and looked at the grand piano, standing proudly in the center of the stage. Its polished surface reflected the lights above like still water. She remembered the feeling of playing it at night when no one was around, how the sound had filled the empty space and comforted her. Tonight, it would be different. As the day went on, her nerves grew. She tried to distract herself with chores, but her thoughts kept returning to the same thing: the music, the audience, the memory of who she used to be. When the sun began to set, the hall slowly filled with people. Parents, students, neighbors, and guests from the town took their seats, their voices blending into a gentle hum. The woman watched from behind the curtain as the lights dimmed. The head of the school stood on stage and welcomed everyone warmly. He spoke about the students' hard work, about music as a form of expression, and about the special performance that would open the evening. When he mentioned her name, a quiet murmur spread through the crowd. Some looked surprised. Others whispered to each other. She felt her heart leap into her throat. The headmaster smiled at her from across the stage and gave a small nod, her cue to step out. For a moment she couldn't move. Her knees felt weak, her palms damp with nervous sweat. She closed her eyes, took a deep breath, and whispered to herself, "It's just the piano. It's just music." Then slowly she walked out onto the stage. The lights were bright and she could feel hundreds of eyes on her. The hall fell silent. She could hear the faint rustle of programs. A cough somewhere in the back, the soft creak of a chair. It had been so long since she'd stood before an audience like this. She bowed her head politely, then sat down at the piano. Her reflection glimmered faintly on the black surface. The keys looked familiar, comforting, almost alive under the glow of the lights. She placed her hands gently on the keyboard and waited for the noise in her chest to quiet. Her heart still pounded, but when she pressed the first note, everything else seemed to disappear. The sound filled the room, soft, clear, and pure. Then came the next note and the next. Within seconds, the melody took shape, smooth and flowing, like a calm river running through a valley. The crowd leaned forward, drawn in by the first few measures. She played with her eyes half closed, letting her fingers guide her. Each movement felt natural, like breathing. The fear began to fade. Her body relaxed, her heart steadied, and she became one with the piano. Every sound carried emotion. There was no showmanship, no pretense, only feeling. The notes rose and fell like the rhythm of a heartbeat, sometimes soft, sometimes bold, sometimes aching, sometimes full of hope. The audience sat perfectly still. Even the children who had been whispering moments before were now frozen, their eyes fixed on her hands. Halfway through the piece, the music grew stronger, faster, deeper, filled with power. Her fingers moved with speed and grace that stunned even the teachers who had mocked her days ago. They watched, unable to look away.
She was no longer the cleaner they knew.
She was something else, someone reborn. The music spoke for her. It told stories she could never put into words, of lost dreams, of pain carried in silence, of the beauty that still lived inside her despite everything she'd endured. The lights reflected off her face, showing both calm and intensity. She wasn't performing to impress anyone. She was simply sharing a truth that had been buried for years. The final part of the piece came like a soft sigh. Her hands slowed, the melody softened, and the last note lingered in the air, long, sweet, and trembling. Then there was silence. For a moment, no one moved. The hall was completely still, as if time had stopped. Then slowly applause began, soft at first, then louder, rising until it filled the entire room. People stood up, clapping with tears in their eyes. The woman looked up, startled. She had not expected this. Not the applause, not the standing ovation, not the emotion on their faces. She simply bowed her head slightly, too overwhelmed to speak. The head of the school stepped forward, clapping the loudest. His eyes were full of pride and wonder. That, he said when the noise finally faded, was not just music. That was life itself. She smiled shyly, still sitting at the piano. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice barely audible. After the recital ended, people came up to her one by one, offering kind words. Students thanked her for inspiring them. Teachers apologized for underestimating her. Some of them even asked if she could give lessons. But she didn't think of herself as a teacher. She only smiled and said, "Music belongs to everyone. You just have to listen closely enough." Later that night, when the hall was empty again, she sat alone on the stage. The applause still echoed faintly in her ears. But it wasn't the praise that moved her. It was the realization that she had finally allowed herself to be seen. For years, she had lived quietly in the background, believing her music was gone. Yet here she was, proving to herself that it had never left. She touched the piano keys again, softly pressing a few notes. They sounded different now, not sad or heavy, but alive. As she sat there, the same teacher who had first teased her that day walked into the hall. He didn't say anything at first, just stood near the door watching her. After a moment, he said quietly, "You changed the way I see music." She turned to him, surprised. "What do you mean?" He smiled faintly. "I always told my students that playing was about skill, about control. But today you showed us that it's about feeling, about heart." She looked down, her eyes soft. "Music doesn't ask for perfection. It just asks you to be honest." He nodded, touched by her words. "Would you maybe consider playing again? Professionally, I mean. You could perform. People would come to hear you." She shook her head gently. "I don't need to be famous. I just needed to remember who I am." The teacher smiled, understanding. "Then I hope you never forget again." When he left, she stayed for a while longer, listening to the faint hum of the empty room. She remembered the first day she was asked to play on. The laughter, the teasing, the disbelief, and how different it all felt now. Sometimes, she thought, Life waits quietly for the right moment to open its door again. The night air was cool when she finally stepped outside. The streetlights glowed softly, and the sound of distant traffic mixed with the quiet hum of crickets. She walked home slowly, her bag over her shoulder, her heart light. For the first time in years, she didn't feel small or unseen. She felt full, like a part of her that had been asleep had finally woken up. As she reached her small apartment, she sat by the window and looked out at the stars. The world outside was silent, but inside her there was music, a quiet, endless melody that made her smile. She whispered to herself, "Maybe I never stopped being a pianist. I just forgot to listen." And that night, she dreamed not of work or worry, but of sound and of beautiful, endless sound that filled every corner of her heart. The morning after the recital, the woman woke up earlier than usual. The light of dawn poured through her window, soft and golden, and she sat at the edge of her bed for a long time, thinking about what had happened. The applause, the smiles, the way people looked at her, it all still felt like a dream. For years, she had walked through life quietly, almost invisible. She had accepted that music was something she had lost forever, something she could only remember but never live again. But now, everything had changed. The piano keys had brought her back to herself. As she got ready for work, she wondered how people at the school would see her now. Would they treat her differently? Would they still look at her as just the cleaner? Or would they now see the person behind that quiet face? She wasn't sure. All she knew was that the night before had reminded her that she still had a story to tell, one she had buried for far too long. When she reached the school, the halls were unusually quiet. Then, one by one, students began to greet her. Some smiled shyly, others said thank you. A few even clapped softly as she passed. She felt her face warm with embarrassment, but also gratitude. It was strange to be noticed after so many years of blending into the background. The teacher who had first asked her to play met her near the piano room. "Good morning," he said with a kind smile. "You were wonderful last night. Everyone's still talking about it." She smiled politely. "Thank you," she said softly. "I didn't mean to cause such a fuss." He shook his head. "It's not a fuss. It's a reminder that we should never judge people by what we see on the surface." She looked down, not sure how to respond. As the day went on, she could hear students whispering bits of questions as she passed. Who taught her to play? Was she a professional? How did she end up working here? She smiled faintly to herself. The curiosity didn't bother her. She understood it. People always wonder about things they can't easily explain. That afternoon, the head of the school asked her to meet him in his office. She walked in quietly, nervous, unsure if something was wrong. He greeted her warmly and gestured for her to sit. On his desk was a newspaper, the local one. Her name was printed on the front page under a headline that read, "Cleaner astonishes audience with piano performance." She froze when she saw it. "Oh no," she whispered, covering her mouth. "They wrote about it?" The headmaster smiled. "Yes, and people are inspired. The article says you reminded everyone that real talent has no age, no title, no limits. People from the town are asking about you. Some even want to meet you." She didn't know what to say. The attention made her uneasy, but part of her was touched. For years she had been no one special, just another face people passed by without noticing. Now the same world that ignored her was applauding her. The headmaster leaned forward, his expression gentle. "If you don't mind me asking," he said softly, "who are you really? Before you came here, what did you do?" For a moment she didn't speak. Her eyes wandered to the window where sunlight fell across the floor. Then she sighed, her voice quiet and thoughtful. "I suppose it's time someone knew," she said. She told him everything. She spoke of her childhood, how she fell in love with music before she could even read, how she taught herself to play on a broken piano her father had found. She told him about her youth when she was accepted into a music academy and studied under a well-known pianist. She had played in competitions, even won a few. Her talent had been recognized early, and for a while it seemed she might have a future on stage. But life, as it often does, changed suddenly. Her parents grew ill, and she had to return home to take care of them. Money became tight. When they passed away, she was left alone and struggling to survive. Opportunities faded. The piano she loved had to be sold to pay rent. After that, she never played again. The headmaster listened quietly, not interrupting once. When she finished, he looked at her with deep respect. "You gave up everything for your family," he said softly. "That takes real strength," she smiled faintly. "I used to think I lost everything," she said. "But maybe I didn't lose it. Maybe it was just waiting for me to come back." He nodded slowly. "Would you allow me to share your story with the students? I think it could inspire them." She hesitated, thinking it over. "If it helps them understand that music is more than fame or recognition, then yes," she said. "You can tell them." The next morning, during assembly, the headmaster spoke to the students about her story. He didn't tell it dramatically. He told it with honesty and warmth. He talked about her sacrifices, her hidden talent, and her courage to start again. The students listened in silence. Some had tears in their eyes. When she walked through the halls later that day, the way people looked at her had changed completely. It wasn't pity or surprise anymore. It was respect. Some of the older students approached her shyly and asked if she could teach them how to play with emotion. "Our teacher says we play correctly," one of them said. "But when you play, it feels like something inside you speaks." "How do we do that?" She smiled kindly. "You don't play to impress," she said. "You play to feel. Let the music tell your story, even if no one else hears it." They listened closely, writing down every word as if she were their mentor. Soon, more students began to come to her for advice. Some asked her to listen to their pieces. Others wanted to watch her hands while she played. Though she never thought of herself as a teacher, she couldn't refuse their eagerness. Slowly, she became part of their learning, not officially, but in spirit. Her evenings were now filled with music once again. After cleaning up, she would stay behind, playing small melodies as students lingered after class. The sound filled the building, wrapping the halls in warmth and calm. One evening, while she was helping a student practice, the teacher who once teased her walked in. He smiled sheepishly. "I came to apologize," he said quietly. "When I asked you to play that day, I wasn't kind. I treated you as a joke. I'm truly sorry." She looked at him, her expression gentle. "You don't need to apologize," she said. "If you hadn't asked me, I might never have played again." He looked surprised, then smiled with relief. "You're very forgiving," she chuckled softly. "Life's too short to hold on to bitterness. Sometimes the things that hurt us open doors we didn't know were there." He nodded. "You've changed this school more than you know." In the weeks that followed, the music school became a little brighter. The students practiced harder, but not just for competition, for the love of it. Teachers began encouraging creativity instead of perfection. And every day, the quiet woman who once swept the floors became a symbol of what true passion looked like. She never sought fame or recognition, yet her story spread far beyond the walls of the school. People from nearby towns came to hear her play during open recitals. She always sat humbly, never boasting, never acting as though she was someone special. But when her fingers touched the keys, everyone in the room felt something deep, something that reminded them of their own forgotten dreams. One night, after another small recital, a woman from the audience approached her with tears in her eyes. "Your music made me remember my mother," she said softly. She used to play too. "I'd forgotten how it felt until tonight." "Thank you." The pianist smiled gently and took her hand. "Music has a way of bringing us home," she said. As the hall emptied, she sat alone again at the piano, the same one she had once cleaned every day. She ran her hands across its surface and whispered, "You were always waiting for me, weren't you?" Outside, the wind rustled softly through the trees. Inside, she played one last tune, not for an audience, not for applause, but for the pure joy of being able to play again. And in that quiet room, where it had all begun, her heart finally felt whole. The days that followed were unlike anything the woman had ever experienced. Life at the music school felt warmer, brighter, almost as if the building itself had come alive. Students no longer whispered behind her back or glanced at her as if she were invisible. Instead, they greeted her with smiles, carried their instruments past her with pride, and sometimes even asked if she had a moment to listen to them play. Yet she remained humble. She never let the attention change who she was. To her, music had always been a private place, a quiet space where she could be herself without worry or expectation. But now she could see the effect it had on others, how a simple melody could inspire, calm, or bring joy. She realized that her music could do something she had never considered before. It could touch hearts. Word of her talent spread far beyond the walls of the school. People from neighboring towns came to see her play during open recitals. Some arrived early in the morning, clutching tickets. Others came in the evening after long workdays, hoping for just a few moments of peace while listening to her music. Yet no matter how many people gathered to hear her, she always remained the same quiet woman, greeting them with a polite smile and a soft nod, never seeking the spotlight. The first few recitals were small, intimate gatherings. Families, neighbors, and students crowded into the music room. The woman would sit at the piano, her fingers hovering over the keys, taking a deep breath, and then begin. The music flowed like water, gentle at first, then bold, full of emotion, full of stories. With each note, she poured out the years of silence, the pain of lost dreams, and the joy of rediscovery. People who had never known her story were drawn in by the depth of her playing. Some wept quietly in the corners of the room. Others simply closed their eyes, letting the music speak to memories they thought had faded. It was not just a performance. It was a conversation without words, a bridge between her heart and the hearts of everyone listening. Teachers and students alike watched her with awe. Those who had once laughed at her or underestimated her now felt a deep sense of respect. They realized that true talent is not measured by appearances or titles, but by the courage to continue, the dedication to practice, and the honesty of feeling. One afternoon, a group of young students gathered around her after practice. "How do you play like that?" one of them asked. "I've been trying for months, but it never sounds like yours." She smiled softly, brushing a strand of hair behind her ear. "It's not about how fast you can move your fingers," she said. "It's about feeling. Let the music tell your story. Don't try to impress anyone. Play for yourself first and then let others hear it." Another student, hesitant but curious, asked, "Were you always this good?" She laughed lightly, shaking her head. "No. I learned slowly, made many mistakes, and sometimes stopped completely. But I never stopped loving the music. That's what matters." Her words sank deep into their hearts. For many of them, she became more than a teacher. She became a living example of resilience, of quiet strength, and of following a passion even after life has pushed you aside. Soon, invitations began to arrive from other schools and local music groups. Some wanted her to perform at community events. Others asked her to give demonstrations or small workshops. She never refused. Not for fame, not for money, but because she wanted others to experience the same joy she felt when she played. One evening, after a long day of teaching and performing, she returned to her small apartment. She sat by the window, the soft hum of the city below blending with the faint sound of piano notes she could still hear in her mind. For the first time in years, she felt complete. The music was no longer something she had lost. It was a living part of her again. Her mind wandered back to the first time she had been asked to play at the school. The laughter, the teasing, and the disbelief. She remembered how small she had felt, how invisible she had thought herself to be, and now here she was, standing quietly at the center of attention, not seeking it, not needing it, but simply letting herself be heard. It wasn't just about the music. It was about proving to herself that she still mattered, that her gifts were not forgotten, and that even a life that seemed ordinary could contain extraordinary moments. One day, a local newspaper asked to interview her. She agreed, though she felt nervous. When they arrived, the journalist asked her about her life, her past, and how she had found the courage to play again after so many years. She spoke gently, almost as if telling a story to herself. "I never stopped loving music," she said. "I just forgot that it could still be a part of my life. Life takes many things from us, but it doesn't have to take everything. You can always return to the things you love if you remember how to listen." The article was published a few days later. People wrote letters, sent messages, and visited her at the school. Some shared their own stories of dreams put aside, of passions forgotten, of talents hidden by life's struggles. Her music had inspired them to pick up their own instruments again, to return to their own quiet dreams. It was a ripple effect she had never imagined. One person's courage to play, one person's willingness to share their gift could touch the lives of so many others. And yet she remained humble. She never sought recognition, awards, or titles. The applause, the praise, the admiration. It was all secondary. The true reward was the connection, the understanding that music could bring people together in ways words never could. Even as her story spread, she continued her daily routine. She cleaned the school, set up practice rooms, and made tea for the teachers. She played the piano in the quiet of the evenings, often alone, but sometimes with students lingering to listen or learn. She had found a rhythm that balanced work, life, and music, and it brought her peace. One afternoon, as she practiced a piece that she had not played in decades, a young student approached her. "I want to play like you someday," he said shyly. She smiled warmly. "Then start now," she said. "Play every day, even if it's just a little. Don't worry about how others will hear it. Play because it makes you happy. That's all that matters." He nodded, inspired, and went off to practice. She watched him go, feeling a quiet satisfaction. Music was no longer hers alone. It was being passed on, carried forward by new hands and new hearts. Months passed, and the woman's presence at the school became a constant source of inspiration. People began to understand that greatness is not always loud or flashy. Sometimes it is quiet, humble, and persistent. Sometimes it is a woman who cleans the floors, listens in the shadows, and then surprises the world with something she never forgot she could do. Her life had changed, but in the best way. She had found her purpose again, not in fame or recognition, but in the simple act of playing and sharing music. She had discovered that her own joy could ignite joy in others, that her quiet life could create ripples far beyond what she had imagined. One evening, after a small performance, she packed up her things and walked out into the cool night air. The streets were quiet, the moonlight soft on the rooftops. She thought about the journey she had taken, from hiding in the shadows, from losing her dreams, from feeling invisible, to standing in the light, sharing her gift with the world. She smiled to herself. It had been a long road, filled with struggle and loss, but also with discovery and resilience. She had learned that it's never too late to return to the things you love. It's never too late to find yourself again. As she walked home, she hummed a melody she had composed herself, one that told the story of her life, her struggles, her joy, and her hope. It was quiet, simple, and beautiful, just like her, and in that quiet song, she found the most important truth of all, that happiness is not in recognition or fame, but in the courage to follow your heart, the joy of doing what you love, and the willingness to share it with the world, even if only a little. Her story became more than a tale of talent rediscovered. It became a story of hope, inspiration, and the quiet strength that exists in every person, waiting for the right moment to be seen. And she, the simple woman who once swept floors and moved through life unnoticed, had finally been heard, quite not just by others but by herself.